Hi guys, welcome back to the Daughter Arise channel. My name is Yvonne and this channel is all about bringing you content about childhood sexual abuse. On this channel I share things to do with my experience of going through this childhood trauma. I also cover news stories and add my thoughts and commentary to them. And from time to time, when I'm fortunate enough, I do interview other survivors and their supporters in hopes of raising awareness of this childhood abuse. So if this is the type of content you're looking for, please hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so that you can be notified of any new uploads. And if you do like the content, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. First of all guys, before I get into the video, I just want to welcome all my new subscribers. Thank you for subscribing to this channel. I really appreciate it. You know, it's been quite a journey on this channel over the last 11-12 years. I understand that the things that I talk about on this channel is not popular, it's not tea, it's not gossip, it's not entertainment. So in order to grow this channel, you know, it has been a little bit of a challenge, but nevertheless, everything happens in good time. But I just want to welcome you guys. Thank you for subscribing to this channel, and to my subscribers that have been with me for ages, for such a long time. I really appreciate your support. Thank you for continuing to support this channel. So guys, today I'm doing a video about this man on your screen right here. I'm doing a video about P. Diddy, Puff Daddy, Brother Love, whatever he wants to call himself. I've always said when it comes to this man, no matter how much you change your name, you'll never be able to run away from the things that you've done. And over the last year or so, we have been seeing quite openly and publicly the downfall of Diddy. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with P. Diddy, he is a rap so-called mogul. He's been around since the early 1990s, back in the day when I was a 17, 18-year-old girl. Some of the music that I used to listen to used to come from a lot of bad boy artists like Faith, Biggie, Total, Mace, 112. You know, those of us who grew up in the 90s know that, you know, bad boy music and the artists that produced that music, you know, was a huge part of growing up, you know, in that time period. And as time has gone along, you know, over the years, there has been lots of things that have come out about P. Diddy and lots of kind of unexplained, questionable things that, you know, people are still to get their head around. For example, like, you know, the mysterious deaths of Kim Porter, Biggie Smalls, Tupac. Also, we have many of the former artists on Bad Boy saying they were ripped off and robbed by Diddy's record label, not paid their royalties, not paid properly, treated badly. And there's obviously been other rumours around his women beating and other things that he has done to people, including trying to blow up somebody's car. Recently, what happened in November 2023, I think it was, is that Cassie, his former girlfriend, who was with him for about 11 or so years, basically filed a civil lawsuit against him. And it just let out a whole can of worms, basically, about what was going on behind the scenes in these two's relationship. He was beating her, trafficking her out for sex, all kinds of disgusting things. And literally, P. Diddy settled within a day of that lawsuit coming to light. And ever since that, it's been going downhill for this man. And today I want to share with you about the press conference, the latest thing that has come out about Diddy. Because since the Cassie lawsuit, loads of women and some men have come out to say that P. Diddy raped them, assaulted them, and all that type of stuff. And I should say here, actually, before I get into what I want to talk about, that you may find this video triggering if you've gone through any type of abuse, especially sexual abuse or childhood sexual abuse. But as I always say on this channel, it's important for me to talk about these things. This is a space on this channel to talk about childhood sexual abuse without shying away from the things that people and society deem uncomfortable. That is one of the reasons why it is so hard to talk about childhood sexual abuse, because it's not pleasant, it's shocking, it's obviously appalling what I've gone through, what millions of other victims and survivors have gone through. But even though it's appalling, we still have to talk about it. So I just want to give you a little bit of a trigger warning, because I am going to talk about the latest things that have come up in the P. Diddy case. So with all that said, I just want to talk about the news conference that happened with the latest news about P. Diddy in regards to P. Diddy's case. Actually, it's not in regards to the criminal case that is going on with P. Diddy. At the moment, he is sitting in prison, been denied bail after applying twice, even putting up 50 million. He's sitting in jail because the federal government have a case against him for trafficking. This case is to do with a civil suit brought by 120 alleged victims, and I have to say alleged at this point because even in what Tony Buzbee says, who is the lawyer that has been taken on by these 120 victims, they are still going through a process of checking stories. Now, this news conference was held on Fox News. I watched it on the live stream, and to be honest with you, after watching it, I just felt really sick, especially for the victims. Some of the things that were talked about in the news conference was really disturbing to hear. Now, apparently Tony Buzbee is a well-known lawyer, has got a very good reputation of settling cases. He is a very credible lawyer. All lawyers are supposed to be credible, but I suppose, you know, some are from listening to some other people's live streams and things like that. Some lawyers are quite shady, but this lawyer is meant to be quite credible in the things that he does, and he's quite thorough. So I'm just going to talk to you about my thoughts on this news conference, because the reason I'm sharing this with you is that it has come to light that in the 120 victims, 25 of those were minors at the time when P. Diddy sexually assaulted them, allegedly sexually assaulted them or raped them. So this is why I've picked up this story, not to say that what the adult victims have gone through is not, you know, newsworthy. It is, but because I deal with childhood sexual abuse, I wanted to pick up on this story. So I'm just going to share with you what was shared in the news conference. I made lots of notes, so I am going to be looking at my phone. As you can see on the screen, this is Tony Buzbee. This is a still of the news conference. I will leave a link to the actual news conference in the description box below. I did try and share videos before from news channels, and I ended up getting a strike on my channel. So until I figure out how to actually do that without getting a strike, you know, I will leave a link to any kind of news conference videos that I do stories on in the description box below. So basically the news conference was about the alleged victims, and basically Tony Buzbee, as I mentioned, is taking on a civil case for the victims. It's not a class action, as the victims span over 20 years, I think from the time frame of 1991 going upwards, and they are from different backgrounds, ages and race as well. So the reason it's not a class action, because it didn't happen to them all in one place at one time. That is my kind of understanding of it from, you know, watching some lawyers on YouTube talking about it. But basically these 120 victims are from a time period spanning over 20 years. Okay, so the law firm has retained these victims. Apparently 3,285 alleged victims came forward, and I think they called a hotline number. But after vetting, 120 individuals will be represented by Tony Buzbee's firm. Now, what was really good about this case conference, this news conference I should say, is the fact that it wasn't just a news conference, it was a opportunity that the law firm used to also educate people about the reasons why survivors of sexual assault, sexual abuse, childhood sexual abuse don't come forward. And I'm going to get into a little bit more about that as I go along in the video, but some of the reasons that he shared was that they're scared of backlash. They're scared of what people in their community will say. He also talked about the fact that in his comments and on his social media, that fans of these celebrities and stars who, you know, for whatever reason he ends up, you know, having to bring cases against, the fans will be in the comments defending their idols. And when I heard that, for me, it just sounded so bizarre and so crazy. And he said, you know, he's had people threatening to kill him made all kinds of comments towards him, but he said because he has been in this for a long time, it's not his first rodeo, that's what he said, it's like water off a duck's back. But he was saying for the victims and survivors, it makes it very difficult for them to come forward, and even if they do come forward, it's very hard for them to continue to see things through because of all the pressure, all the accusations, all the comments that they get. And I thought that was very good that he brought that up, because a lot of people will say things, and he mentioned this, like, oh, why didn't you say nothing sooner? If they did this to you, then why didn't you tell somebody about it? And all these type of comments. And I've shared on this channel on these videos that it is not as simple as that. And he made a very good point in regards to this, because he said in the first instance, when he's approached by a victim, is to believe them, because he said he recognises the courage it takes to speak out about abuse that you've gone through at the hands of somebody. It could be somebody prominent, it could be somebody well known in a family. And I thought that was a great point that he brought up, because it's something that I talk about on this channel. People are always quick to accuse and say to the victims and survivors, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? So it's very hard for victims and survivors to speak out because of all these kind of questioning they get, whilst on the other hand, the alleged perpetrators or the perpetrators of this abuse never get these type of questions. So I really like the fact that he brought up some of the dilemmas that victims face. Also, he said that there is strength in numbers. This is so true. I have seen this firsthand with the stuff I do through Daughter Arise, an organisation I set up 13 years ago to help survivors of childhood sexual abuse. There is definitely power in numbers. So he then went on to talk a little bit more about the vetting process and how they have hired as a law firm full-time an ex-detective to vet as part of the process. So he was talking about, you know, checking things that have been said to them by the alleged victims, like names, places, venues where the alleged attacks happen. He also said that they have texts, videos and other evidence, and they have been going through that all that information. And what I got from that in listening to him talk about the vetting process is that they have quite a robust vetting process. So it's not a thing that people can just come and say all these things to them, because obviously you do get an element of that. But the fact that they had over 3,285 alleged victims come forward and are now taking on 120 of those cases shows that they have gone through quite a thorough vetting process. And he says in the next 30 days as well, they will start to name names. And he said that we will be surprised at some of the names who were involved in this. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. So he says the ages of the victims range across the board. But he said some of them, and I mentioned at the beginning, 25 of them were minors at the time of these incidents with P. Diddy and associates. He said the ages of the youngest victims are 9 years old, 14 and 15 years old at the time of the assaults. And then, as I said, the ages range. Again, he just made a mention here of the recognition of, you know, the statutes of limitations in different states in America. Now, I'm over here in England. I don't really know a lot about it. I did cover about the statutes of limitations on another video I did. And I feel that it's really positive in America, within many states, that they recognise how hard it is for victims to come forward. And in that video that I did about the Catholic Church, there were quite a few states that extended it past 5 years, because obviously they do now recognise it is hard for people to come forward, especially when it's to do with people within positions of power, like within the church or celebrities and other people who are quite prominent. And he did specifically mention states like Manhattan, New York and California, where that is the case, where they have a grace period and a time for survivors to come forward, allowing them that time so that they can speak about the things that have happened to them. But I must say, even when I did the Empower event in California in 2019, when I went over to California to host an event for survivors and victims, and had other organisations involved over there who support survivors of sexual assault and childhood sexual abuse, they really do take this type of stuff seriously. Also, he shared that most of the incidents, the assaults, happened at parties, some private residence and hotels. Also, he did mention the casting couch situation, because the 9-year-old, I think if I remember correctly, had gone for an audition and basically was told to come back and see P. Diddy in private, and he was sexually abused. He said 55% of the cases were reported to authorities at the time of the assault. Now that to me is so shocking. The fact that we have now cases that were reported to hospitals, to the police, and nothing was done, just shows you how powerful P. Diddy was at the time, that nobody would follow up on these reports. And, you know, I'm going to be interested to hear how that was allowed to happen, if these cases do make it to court, and, you know, how it all unfolded. So horse tranquilizer, he said, were in some of the victims' blood samples. You know, some of them went to hospital at the time. Big name celebrities, not just Sean Combs, P. Diddy, Love, Puff Daddy, whatever you want to call him, were involved and were named as perpetrators. Also, there were people who enabled his behaviour. He noted from obviously the interviews and things that he's had with the alleged victims that there were people present who watched, egged on, and were willing participants in what he calls foul conduct. Tony Buzbee also said that the enablers of these vile assaults are going to be held to account, and that includes companies, including pharmaceutical companies and banks. So that's quite surprising, actually. It'll be interesting to see how they played a part in this type of behaviour that has been allegedly done by P. Diddy. Now, he talked about the MO that they have found through all these cases. So I feel like they've got like a research thing that they're doing whilst they're compiling all this information for these cases, meaning that, you know, they're looking for like themes or commonalities that have happened between all these different 120 victims. And he has said that they have found an MO in these cases. He talked about in each of these cases their drinks were spiked, presumably with the horse tranquilizer that he mentioned. He said that they were sexually assaulted, they were passed around, and then they were threatened to keep quiet. And he says that the charges that they plan to file are sexual assault, rape, sexual abuse of minors, and forced imprisonment. So just from reading that, I just feel like, you know, this is going to be really, really big. Not only have we heard that P. Diddy is not the only one on the hook for these crimes, other celebrities, as he said, we would be shocked by the names of those who were present. You know, they must be quaking in their boots. But this is the thing, you see, when you have money and power, you think you're above the law. And P. Diddy thought he was above the law for a very, very long time. And if you were in his shoes, would you blame him? I mean, you've had a span of over 21 years doing people, or 25 years doing people dirty, getting away with things that normal people would never get away with. This is just disgusting. This is just shocking that he thought this behaviour was okay to do, because you have power, because you have money, because you have enablers and yes men and all kinds of people around you that facilitate you to do this type of thing. I want to then talk about Kerry Paul, who was the National Victim Advocate. Now, Tony Buzbee handed over to her, and she spoke about the challenges of victims speaking out. She also talked about, besides the things that Tony Buzbee mentioned about, you know, fear of shame, fear of being blamed, you know, people not believing them and all that stuff. She also talked about lack of funding for the justice system. Therefore, you know, how it then goes on to affect the knowledge or training of the staff. And this is something that I mentioned in my 2019 book, Choose Life, which is a practical empowerment workbook for survivors. I was saying that it would be so amazing, over here in the UK I was talking about, if people like myself, it doesn't necessarily have to be me, but people who have gone through the experience, who have a formal training background were to go into places like law firms or talk to law staff from a survivor's perspective about how, for example, in my case, familial sexual abuse affects children, how it affects families, and the things that children have to come up against. And I talked about this in my book at the time, and she was talking about something similar here. The fact that, you know, they haven't been able to do that, go into like these type of places and, you know, train staff and bring an awareness about sexual assault and how it affects the victim and the challenges and all the different things that, you know, a victim faces in trying to speak out against their perpetrator. She also said that abusers work themselves into positions of power, which is definitely true. Something I talk about a lot. You know, paedophiles always are trying to wiggle themselves into positions of power, you know, whether it's in churches, whether it's in like the music industry. You have them going into coaching positions, even within family structures. I think one of the areas that is not talked about as well is in family structures, where paedophiles will get themselves into positions within the family. And she also said, which I found quite powerful, is that the victim always sees a different version of the person than everybody else does. That is so true. I've talked about this a lot. As somebody that has gone through childhood sexual abuse, and in speaking to other victims and survivors of this childhood trauma, one of the things that always comes up is how the person who abused them appears to the family, appears in their community, and how when they tried to speak out, they were told off for speaking out or not believed or had things said against them, because the person always appears upstanding, decent, moral, but behind doors, and I mentioned this in the Hugh Edwards videos, they are depraved. So I found it very powerful that she shared that in this news conference. Also as well, Olivia Rivers from the Texas Association of Sexual Assault talked again about the reasons survivors do not speak out, and talks about the fear of retaliation. And she says, again, just to back up Tony Busby's point about people speaking out against their well-loved celebrities, how victims get a lot of pushback and a lot of abuse for doing so. She then talked about some statistics in relation to sexual assaults. Then Tony Busby then shared 5 stories or cases that have been brought to their attention. Again, I need to give you a trigger warning here because some of the details I'm going to share are quite shocking and disturbing. He said that some of the victims, they didn't know they were assaulted because obviously, as mentioned, their drinks were spiked, but they woke up with vagina and anal pain. One of them actually was a pregnant woman who went to a dinner with Diddy and other people were present, and she woke up and she had vagina and anal pain. Allegedly. I have to keep remembering to say that because obviously it is still going through a process. So also as well, a 15-year-old was raped by P. Diddy and his associates, allegedly. There were 2 stories of 2 9-year-olds sexually abused during audition, or what they call casting couch appearances at Bad Boy Records. And in one of the cases, if I remember correctly, the boy whose parents had come with him was told that he needed to come back by himself or to have a period with Diddy by himself. And he was told by Diddy allegedly to perform oral sex on him. Now there's been a bit of outrage about that fact because a lot of people are going in on the parents for allowing their child to get into a situation like that. Until I have more details, I'm not really going to touch upon that today. But it's something that Corey Haim and others have been talking about in the industry for absolute ages, for years. I've done videos on this channel to do with Corey Haim, the 2 Corys from the 80s. Also as well, you know, there's been videos that have been coming up online about Justin Bieber and Usher, who were also minors at the time that they got involved with P. Diddy. And basically what he said at the end is that he wants there to be a more open dialogue about sexual assault how victims are treated, about those who perpetrate these crimes, and why they're held to such a high regard by people that don't know them, why they've been allowed to abuse their power. And I just found this news conference was so tastefully done. My first impressions of this lawyer is that he's somebody that cares about what he's doing. He cares about how these victims are represented. Obviously, he is a civil lawyer. And obviously people will say, well, he's only doing it for the money. But you can tell from how he speaks, how this news conference was put together, that he is somebody, I believe, that is doing it from a place of integrity and wanting to raise awareness of sexual assault and childhood sexual abuse. Because you've got to remember, with other case conferences, people can just go into their stories. And quite rightly, they should be able to, if they've got the courage to do that, share their stories. He didn't have to make it a learning opportunity, not just for those news reporters and people that were in the room, but also for the wider audience. This live stream, when I was on it, had about 20 to 30,000, even more than that, people watching. And I left a comment because I felt it was important for people to know that this is very much appreciated by survivors, by victims, by those who try and empower through organisations like Daughter Arise, like what the things I'm doing and other organisations are doing. It's important for them to know that we appreciate the fact that they're using this to bring a wider education to people about this horrible, horrible crime that happens to people. Sexual assault is one of the worst things that you can go through. Childhood sexual abuse is one of the worst things that you can go through. It can affect a person's life for so many years. In my case, it affected my life for over 20 years. So I was really encouraged by this news conference, and I'm going to be watching this very closely. I am going to be sharing with you guys more as I find out, especially as well to do with the minors in this case, because I think there are so many different things that we can talk about with this. Not just about parents safeguarding their children, about how paedophiles and perpetrators of abuse are able to put on a facade in front of people. There's just so many things that we can talk about from this story, and I plan to use this story to bring awareness and highlight things that I feel people need to know about childhood sexual abuse, and about kind of the different things that happen when somebody like a victim speaks out. So guys, as I said, I will leave a link to the video for you to watch. It is really, for me, shocking that all this has come out, but not surprising. Unfortunately, a lot of people are going to be sad because their favourite celebrities, the ones that they don't know, apart from on social media, are going to be exposed. And I'm thankful to God that this is happening, because for too long survivors of sexual abuse, sexual assault often get overlooked. Their experiences are not acknowledged, or the things that they've been through, how it's impacted them, are not taken into account because of a person standing, the perpetrator, how they present themselves and everything that comes along with that. But that is it for this video, guys. I will see you on the next one. Take care.